Hi, everybody. Tina Brock, producing artistic director here at the Idiopathic Radiculopathy Consortium in Philadelphia. I'm your host for Into the Absurd, a virtually existential dinner conversation. I do hope you'll join us the next 50 minutes. Sit back and relax as we explore the lives, the hearts, the minds, and the spirits of creators in Philadelphia region and around the world. And good afternoon, everyone. Hello, I'm Tina Brock, your host for Into the Absurd, a virtually existential dinner conversation. And we are coming to you from the ITA virtual studio today. I'm sitting in front of a painting by artist Liz Goldberg, which is going to figure into our conversation today with Liz and filmmaker Warren Bass as we talk about their collaborative animated film, Cuban Queens. That's all coming up today on Into the Absurd. Thanks so much for joining us and for being here with us as we venture forth into this virtual space to talk about all things creative. Looking forward to hopefully getting back onto stage with you in 2021. So on today's show, we hope that you'll chime in if you are with us on Zoom, in the Zoom dining room, or if you're with us on Facebook. We'll get to your questions today in our conversation with Liz Goldberg and Warren Bass. So let me tell you a little bit about each one of them. Liz is a guest who's been on the show a number of times since we've been here on Into the Absurd. She's a painter, an animator, an illustrator, a graphic artist teaching at Pratt and Drexel universities. And alongside her collaborator on Cuban Queens, Warren Bass. Warren is the former director of the Film and Media Arts program at Temple. He's a cinematographer, and he is responsible for the work that we're going to actually see part of Cuban Queens on today's show. But I'm very interested to talk to them about their collaboration and how these two brilliant minds came together to make this lovely animated film. So let's welcome them to the Into the Absurd dinner table now, Liz Goldberg and Warren Bass. Welcome to Into the Absurd. Hi, Warren.
Hi.
I always feel like when it finally happens and technically we get together, we've accomplished something.
Yes.
Right? It's like, hi, right? You're there.
We're here.
Right. Well, Liz, welcome back to the show.
Thank
And Warren, Liz has spoken so highly over the years of you. I've known her, for a couple of years now, where I saw an installation of Liz's work over at the Bethany Mission Gallery. And she's spoken about you, so I'm so excited to have you here to talk about your work. And I guess I'd like to start with you, Warren, if we could do that. And that's going back to your work, to your education, to your schooling at the Yale School of Drama. And just to ask you a little bit about, I'm always interested if when artists are studying, if where they ended up or where they are now is where it was on their mind. So when you were in school, did you think that animation was going to be one of your passions?
I studied at both the Yale School of Drama and the Yale School of Art. And then from there, studied at Columbia in film. Mm-hmm. Although I think I had as much of a film education at Yale as I did at Columbia, because they had all these guest filmmakers and guest artists come in. My background before going to Yale is I had already gotten to be a professional theater director, but I had a degree in art, which actually was compatible with directing because schedules and all kinds of other things. And in terms of the absurd, I had directed a lot of the theater of the absurd, like 5 productions of Waiting for Godot, Beckett's Cascando, Act Without Words 1 and 2, Krapp's Last Tape, plus Albee and Pinter and a whole bunch of others, as well as the kind of forerunners of the absurd, like Michel de Gelderode and Tennessee Williams' Camino Real and Strindberg. Wow. So Yale was just a very rich experience, and whether I thought I would be animating after that, I actually did an animated film while I was at Yale, and I used it as part of a production of Three Penny Opera that I was directing there. But I'd come from these backgrounds of theater, art, film, and actually at one point had a 4-year scholarship in physics, which I never fully followed through on, but it also kind of added to cinematography and an understanding of it. And in some ways, I never gave up any one of those tracks, so that I've directed a lot of live theater, I've directed a lot of films, and I've done a number of animated films, a lot of them with Liz. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if that's enough.
Yeah, no, that's the physics. The whole thing is so fascinating. I didn't realize, and I'm so delighted to find out that you've directed so much absurdist and existentialist theater. Did you was it a natural path that you followed out of theater directing and sort of more into film? Was there something about what was or wasn't happening as a theater director that you wanted to explore in another medium, or how did that come about?
I think lots of theater directors eventually got attracted to film, but I was directing at a professional theater called the Washington Theater Club, and the Pettis brothers, who later financed the Coen Brothers films, had a string of movie theaters, which because I was also writing criticism for the Washington Star newspaper, I had free access to. So I would go see a film 17 times if I wanted to. They asked me to direct a kind of a promotional film in 35 millimeter for their theater. And I'd never had any experience in film before. So that was my first film. It was like a 3-minute short called Washington Circle Mon Amour, as a somewhat in-joke and parody on Hiroshima Mon Amour. And from that point on, it really intensified my sense of wanting to also work in film. And I started to include some aspects of film in a sort of a Brechtian manner in some of the theater productions I was doing. And then even more so when I was at Yale, and then eventually totally working in film at Columbia. And so I've done some fiction films. I've done a whole lot of documentaries, because those are more fundable and more broadcastable. And then more or less for the fun of it and the exploration of the medium, a lot of animation. So I didn't stop any one of those kind of tracks.
So I know, Liz, because we've talked so often, and that's how we actually sort of met and found each other, was we were doing a production of, I want to say, The Bald Soprano over at the Bethany Mission Gallery, or one of those works. And that's how we ran into each other. So I know you have a dedication and a love of the theater of the absurd. Would you say, Warren, that you have a special affinity for that genre, either as a theater director and or as a film director? It's
I think it leaves a lot of latitude for the director to be creative, and says a lot about the contemporary experience of life. So I think probably I've directed more absurdist theater than, let's say, realist theater or some other genre.
This is so good to know, Warren. On many levels. So how did you all meet? Liz, I'll let you take that ball, or whoever wants to tackle that one. That's a broad question, but
yeah, it was fortuitous, really. Well, Warren, I had already gotten my MFA, gone out as a painter, but I felt there was an aspect missing. So I actually I applied to NYU for film, and then I also went back to Temple because I didn't want to do a full other degree. Again, I just finished, and I was slightly in debt anyway. So Temple allowed me to come in to do postgraduate work in film, but I really didn't know where I wanted to go. It wasn't until I took Warren's animation class. And it was like the world, I don't know, like all the pieces started to come together, because Warren, was the fact that I could draw so fast. And I always felt that I should be a portrait, I should be painting slow, but I was always moving fast. So it was really the beginning, I think, of these two worlds colliding. And it was like a world that everything made sense. And then theater of the absurd, I've been always wanting, that's kind of my background as well, coming even from painting. And I think I had, and growing up, my mother was determined I would go into theater, so she made me go to drama school for 8 years, which was a little bit painful for me. But I love the theater. I love the back. I like behind stage, and I think that. And then also, I was coming in from the puppetry and the puppet inspired image end, so that was already an absurdist kind of aspect of life. And I just think when we were working, I don't know, it was like that was our first meeting. And Warren, I always one story I always have, because I took screen directing with you. And I think that was one of my most unsuccessful theatrical happenings. But I thought if I had done an animated film of a streetcar named Desire, I think that would have been very successful. But it was the animation. And then it was, we continued to work on pieces. I just think it was the meeting. And then Theater of the Absurd was the other end of it. And it just all started to make sense. And we started to do productions. I think it was the first piece, Drumba, was my final production for the class. It was a 3-minute, 28-second. And I had to do the music as well, which I don't play any instruments, but we were in a dark room with musical instruments. And I think that was kind of our beginning. And Drumba went on to win. We started to work together, and Drumba went on to win many awards. And it was all hand drawn. I think that was the aspect too, hand drawing all the films, of really hand drawing. And then the brilliance of Warren's editing ability. Like, I would hand the drawings, and the brilliance of how he would put these images together always intrigued me. Just really. Yeah.
So the idea for Cuban Queens, did it grow out of art that already existed, or was it a project and you took it to, and I'll hit that one. Well, to either of you, how did it germinate?
I think, I had taken the trip to Havana. Havana was a trip that I'd wanted to take all my life. And then I had taken it. And while I was there, everywhere I go, I always carry a sketch pad. I was drawing the street divas. And they have many walking around. And when I brought it back, that's when we started to talk about it. I had a notebook filled of like drawings of just talking to people on the street, and a lot of them divas. And then the whole concept of the female that smoked the cigars seemed very absurd to me. And from what I understand, they also drink a little whiskey with it. But the cigar smoking female, as you can see in the back,
the painting behind me, or the sketch behind me, right?
Yeah. But they were real people. They were real people that it started with. Yeah. But we had done many films before that, Warren. We had done quite a few. So there was this rhythm that we were building of how to work together, the editing aspect of pulling things together. Beatbox Philly had that same feel. We used to beatbox, and we never really we would use sound that came, I think, from the internal feeling of the film. I mean, I always hear Latin dance in my head. When I hear Latin dance, I know a film's coming, because it's that rhythm. And I work kind of rhythmically, but I think we had already been working in a certain manner. So we had a kind of choreography, I think, that was already started.
So Warren, would you say that, how did you have an idea in your mind when you saw the drawings of what the animation, what this film should look like? Well, did you figure it out as you were going along, or did you kind of see it?
There was a lot of experimentation, but there was originally another version and a completely different film based on those drawings that Liz had started to develop with Lowell Boston, which was a more linear piece, and it was more like traveling through Havana. And they'd gotten it to a certain level. And then I kind of got asked to work on it with them. And we added much more motion and put it into a form that was perfectly synchronized with this wonderful piece of music by a guitarist named Govey.
Yes.
And then we spent like a year trying to get the rights for the music. And he personally said it's fine with him. his agent never, ever responded to us.
Yeah, I was going to fly to California.
Oh my God.
We tried even getting in touch with people that knew the agent and so on. So not getting the rights and certainly wanting to respect that whole process, I thought I should just reconceive what can be done with these images. What happens if we simply make an animated sketchbook as opposed to a character animation? And started experimenting with that, and then ended up with this 1 hour kind of installation piece that explored the images as a sketchbook, as opposed to being a story or a linear story. And so that's how it somewhat came about.
So it kind of took a detour because of the rights issue. It just was.
Yeah, I mean, if we ever get the rights, we would probably come out with the other, and they would be two distinctly different films.
Very different. And Warren, I was finding the linear aspect just not absurdist enough. With the images. So that was where it was just we stopped and kind of regrouped. We looked at Govey. We loved that music. We didn't know what to do. But
we tried to replace the music, and nothing worked. We either do this film with that music, or we do a completely different film.
Yeah,
we
just changed. Yeah,
and it's turned out well because I think, let's see, right now it's been in 59 international film festivals. In 33 countries, won 8 international awards and 10 finalists for awards. And it allowed us to work in a field where we're trying to kind of redefine what animation can be, which interests me more than simply doing a cartoon.
And we talked about animation, this animation where the paintings grow out of the film almost. All the paintings come out of the film, of kind of making it a change in the nature of animation to like structurally painterly form. Even more so than like what Warren say is a cartoon. It becomes more so than what it is, that you change the course of animation in a way of what it becomes. And
adding to that, when I was trying to develop these vertical images, which were black and white, done in pencil and charcoal, and sometimes ink, and kind of exploring what they could do, eventually I started to combine them into triptychs and became interested in what are the interrelationships between these drawings and what are the shifting relationships that can happen among these drawings. And then what would happen if we added color? And by the time Liz is starting to add the color and so on, and we're trying these things out, the triptychs became the inspirations for her to do like the painting that's behind you. So animation process and an experimental process of relating images to other images that then became paintings.
Yeah.
So it sort of just kept
back and forth,
informing itself the entire time, the art and the process. Well, I think maybe it might be a good idea now to show the clip, because I also want to talk about what viewing this does to the mind and to the body in terms of as the viewer. So do you think it's a good time to go ahead and share?
Yeah.
What you got?
So I'll say a couple things about it. There are a lot of very fast images in here, and a lot of our work is done, has at times subliminal images in it. These kind of things are not going to go well over Zoom. And so watching the whole piece over Zoom is probably going to drop frames, hold on to frames, ruin the rhythm of the piece, and so on. But I've put together 2 excerpts tied together, the opening of the film and the closing of the film. And let's see, what else should I say about it? And it'll probably look different on depending on your internet connection to each person. It might freeze on somebody else's, and it might show entirely on somebody else's. But you'll get some idea of the images and the rhythm of the piece. All right, so let me cue it up. There's a second button that says share. I hit the first. Okay, now you see a big.
Pull it all the way up there too.
Right.
On your screen. Yeah, there you go. There we are.
So I'm pulling it up. All right, so now we should be seeing it.
Yes.
Yeah, we are.
Yes,
good.
It's there. Yeah.
Bravo. I have so many questions. That was really, really, really wonderful. Now, how long is the entirety of the piece?
I think
well, there are three versions. The version that goes into festivals is 6 minutes because the piece could try someone's patience. It originally, as a completed piece for festivals, was seven minutes, but for a fairly abstract, non-linear piece, sometimes that's pretty demanding. But there's also an installation version that's 1 hour long, not meant for somebody to be hit with all of those images for an entire hour, but more like you would pass through and watch as much of it as you wanted. Might pass through again or something,
Yeah, it very much had that feeling to me of runway, of fashion runway, and just something that you might see projected and or those images popping off the screen, really. And in the midsection, when it picks up speed, when the music picks up speed, and the figures start to morph together in a dance. A sense. Were you going for that, Warren, when you edited it?
Well, yeah, I think dance, is a really important aspect of the potential of animation, in that both deal with forms in motion. And so the sequence and order of images were chosen in some ways because of the gesture-like and dance-like movements that they can create. We were talking actually before we went on also about the relationship between this and structuralist music like Philip Glass, although I think probably more of an inspiration would be Steve Reich with his phase experiments, because these images go in and out of phase in terms of their relationships with each other, and our perceptions change as that happens. So there's an aspect of music, there's an aspect of dance. And certainly, it's meant to be a painting, and can be watched like a painting, or a sketchbook for that matter.
And I bring in, like, when I'm drawing, I literally, like Warren, when I'm drawing like the images, and putting them together, I am listening to Latin music. I'm listening to the same song over and over again, which really could make you crazy too. But it allows me there has to be a rhythm. The rhythm has to be there, for it to come alive. And then I think just even, being in the fashion end of it for the past few years, ending up kind of falling into that department and teaching, which was very dear to me. I get to dress everybody, it's like, there's an aspect there that I think just with, I'm a colorist. So that adds to it too, for who, taking real people off the street and who they become in their story. And that's the absurdist end that I find, is that these were like real people that I met, and some of them were really wild. Some of the divas at night, at the nightclubs, but they become new characters in a way. And then Warren takes it. It's like then he takes them and it's like they become a new world. They become this structuralist, painterly animation, that other world, and they, it goes back and forth. When I saw them moving, like Warren, when I saw them for the first time, within our hour long, when they moved, it was, to me, it just, the sense of excitement I can't even explain. It was like, there they were. They were
live.
They were live.
And they were all moving together. At some place, it feels like they're almost all on the same floor, and then they become one, and then they're. Warren, let me ask you something sort of more technically about animation, or working in this process of putting these the specific slides together, or pieces of this together, cells together. That has to take an extraordinary level of patience and just zen, right? I mean, to kind of know in what order to place everything. And how do you know whether it's right or right? Do you shoot part of it and then go back and say, no, they're not in the right order? Or how do you test drive the process along the way?
Well, the process has been a little different for different films. Beatbox Philly, I had written a proposal for public television, and the piece had to be pretty much planned out scene by scene by scene, although even within that, there's a certain amount of experimentation. Drumba, the piece that Liz and I collaborated on first, which was in 1999, so we've been collaborating for 22 years, came out of an exercise from the animation class where one part of training for animators is to do the quick sketch and to watch a person modeling who every 5 seconds changes position, and then another 5 seconds, another 5 seconds, another 5 seconds. And so without looking at the paper, you go, then turn the page, another. And the point is, Liz was brilliant at that because she already had an MFA. She had already was a professional artist. So her work in almost becoming the equivalent of a human motion picture camera created this sense of dance and movement, and even if there's misregistration because you're not looking at the page, that was sort of part of it too. There was sort of a magic in all of that movement, and so the finished version of that happened a couple of years after Liz was in the class, but she had already added a really almost funny drum machine track to it, which was kind of perfect. And then what I did to it was do a computerized version that took some of those images further and added a sunrise and a sunset to it, as if this is a Latin dance that's going on 24 hours a day. And then the piece went out and won a lot of awards. And then we just started collaborating more. So the process in that case happened because of an exercise that just lent itself to going further. The process of Beatbox Philly was kind of an exploration of the popular culture sense of what Philadelphia is. And to start with a figure that's somewhat of a scribble walking through Philadelphia that eventually evolves into the equivalent of Rocky running on the stairs and at the art museum, and ends with a pulsating image of Philadelphia that in a heartbeat rhythm with the love sculpture in the foreground. And then something like Strings was kind of based on Samuel Beckett's, that wasn't based on, but somewhat inspired by Samuel Beckett's Act Without Words One, a world that's kind of controlled by figures that are outside of the frame. And then this one, it wouldn't be the best process for making a film, but completing one film and then finding it can't get the rights and then playing with it for a long time. But in most cases, except for when we had a grant deadline, we had the luxury of just spending a lot of time to develop and try things.
Yeah.
Liz, what would you say is the quality that you bring to this collaboration between you and Warren that is the thing that's most opposite of who Warren is?
I guess it would be, the drawing end, being the painter, because that's the end I think I know the best. And like what Warren's saying, when I found my calling of this quick sketch, see, I never knew what to do with it. It was like it was there. I was so good at it, but I didn't know where. And then when we did Drumba, and I realized that this was an asset to animation, that the world of animation opened up. I think it's the drawing. Like we work almost as a dance team. Like if we were, doing like a ballroom dance, everybody knows, like we just kind of work together, like from opposite ends in a way, and then come in. But our minds think alike. That's what I find. Sometimes, Warren, I look at you, you look at me, and it's like, nobody has to say anything. I think we're coming from the same world. And then it goes,
that's interesting.
Comes in, and then Warren pushes me, and then I bring the drawing. It's like we we go back and forth, but I think it's the color. I come in from a painting end. I mean, I come in as a very strong painter and drawer, but it needs the editing and the brilliance of Warren's being able to see that takes these still drawings and makes them come alive. So I think we work from opposite ends that way, but the minds are alike.
It seems as though the worldview or the artistic worldview is similar. I mean, that you share some common grounding in that that absurdist existentialist world.
And I think we push each other too. You know what I mean? It's like we go back and forth. I remember when I had to go find Michel de Gelderode, and all the plays in the library upstairs in Temple were in French. And I was so driven that I called a friend of mine that spoke 5 languages. I said, look, you got to translate this overnight. Because, we came in with like names for things because I had no idea. And there was no English version or something. So it's like, the pushing of taking things beyond what they are. And that to me is exciting, and I think Warren, I know he inspires me for that. And I, hope I do the same, be like, what do we do with this? Or where do we take it? So.
Warren, you mentioned, and I'm forgetting the exact words you used to describe Liz's very quick sketching ability, and that's unusual from your perspective. I guess would you both agree to that that's a gift and an unusual thing to find in an artist that can do something that quickly?
Yeah, and to do it with such a sense of capturing gesture and personality and style. So that's pretty useful.
Yeah. Well, I know Liz, when we first met, she came to a number of rehearsals for Eugenie Ionesco's The Chairs. And that seemed to be a particular, you seem to have a lot of fun at those rehearsals, Liz. And I think it's because there was so much movement and action. And I kept thinking, but we're so not still in this play. How is she doing this? And
I was having a blast.
Would be so the only still things were the imaginary people that never appeared on stage. You know?
And they were live to me. I don't know about anybody else, but I could feel them and see them. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yes, very much. I think that's the gold in that play. Warren, what would you say? If you had to look at how your interest in physics plays into all this?
I think it helps me more in terms of cinematography and understanding f-stops, optics, light. But in probably a less defined way, it gives me an understanding of color and a way of looking at even paint and graphics that has a number of ramifications to it. Otherwise, I found physics pretty boring.
So you did study for a while.
I was one of these people that aced the SAT and had come from a family that had no one that I was ever related to who had graduated from high school. But because of that, was offered just out of the blue scholarships from everywhere. So I took a 4-year scholarship in physics and decided I was naive enough to think that I would study with the Nobel Prize winner that was head of the program, and found instead that you study with a grad assistant who barely knows more than you do. And had gotten into professional theater just as I got out of high school. And so I went in the direction of theater and art. But the physics, the 1 year of physics, and the fact that, and one reason I was offered so many scholarships in science is I had won a lot of science fair awards in high school. And I think that still helps solve the technical problems of animation.
Yeah. Because Tina, one thing I'm just intrigued with, because Warren, when we worked together, your knowledge of just the technical end of it, which I really didn't have, was so important, and especially when we were still working on real film under the cameras. I mean, we'd have to count back to do a dissolve, and Warren has a brilliance in that area, which it gives me a sense of structure, like when I'm working, even in painting, that I never had. It may not be my area at all. So that's part is, to me, I love, because I kind of put it in, and then it allows me to kind of shift, I think, my perspective when I'm working. And that helps tremendously. There's an intrigue there that is amazing. So that end of it, I don't know, Warren, if you have. I just always found that. I just remember counting back, and the love thing kind of. We made a mistake. I counted wrong. That's when we brought on your youngest daughter to help count, because you'd have to go back 5,000 frames. It wasn't like you were going back 10 frames. And we something dropped, but then we used it. Then we actually made it very much part of the film, of the love statue blinking on and off. From that, but that was, that end I always find so amazing and intriguing, So,
Liz, I want to get your thoughts on, you mentioned before that your mother wanted you to go to theater, or you went to theater school because it was a desire, a joy of
her part. Yes.
On her part. That's so funny, because usually, you got the exact opposite thing.
I know.
The kid's like, no, I have to be a theater artist.
Yeah, she
like,
was
no, you don't.
determined that I think, it sounds absurd now. Maybe that's part of the theater of absurd, but she felt that I was a very shy child, and she put me into ballet. And then somehow theater, it's an important part, I guess, of my family. Opera was in my family, 3 tenors. So we were always in the theater, always going there. But there was something probably that she had wanted to, and I painstakingly went to drama school. And to tell you the truth, I couldn't memorize anything. I mean, I remember doing one with a nymph when I was 12 years old, and I didn't even know what a nymph was. But to me, it was almost like theater of the absurd that I was going through this, and I'd have to memorize these lines and not quite know what I was talking about.
Did you make it clear to her that I'm not so sure this is my thing?
I think I did. I'm not sure.
It's hard when you're in the middle.
It's hard when you're younger.
Yeah, sure.
By the time I was 14, I said, that's it. I'm just going to art school. I mean, she did that with piano too. And the piano teacher said, I think just let her stick to art. I never got out of book 1.
Yeah.
So, but the thing that she did do is that she was really she was such a fashionista and such a dramatist. When she entered a room, it was like you just had to stop for a moment. And I think that was what she was trying to pass on. I don't know, but the plays were painful.
For you or for the audience?
I think for both.
I guess.
And Warren, when we had to do Streetcar Named Desire, remember that? I think I lost 5 pounds that week because I was so stressed, about having to play any part in it. And I thought if I had done an animation, that would have just, to drawn it. But I think it just wasn't my forte.
Yeah.
But I did learn a lot from it. I have a love of theater. I have a love of just the smell of the theater, when you go in, and the appreciation too of being able to memorize a script to begin with.
Yeah, sure.
So that was the background of the 8 years of drama school. It all feeds in, these various parts of what you come from. I think if you're open to it, just feed into like what you become eventually.
Sure.
But you do have to kind of forge it after a while and kind of make it in your direction. But
be open, recognize what.
Yeah, she probably was very heartbroken that I didn't pursue it.
Well, you are quite theatrical in the art that you're pursuing, in the way in which. Warren, do you have a favorite? Favorite's not a great word, but a director whose work you particularly seem to follow or enjoy, or
you're talking about in theater, film, or
either, both, all, everything. Yeah.
In theater, Nikos Sakaropoulos, who was an amazing director at the Yale School of Drama and in New York, Also Mike Nichols, who at one point I had as a guest when I was teaching at AFI. And in film, well, there'd be a whole range. I pretty much was inspired a lot by the French New Wave directors, but also something like Bertolucci's Conformist. In animation, most of the directors that came out of the National Film Board of Canada, a lot of whom I knew personally.
Yeah, I was just looking at Norman McLaren's film again, the ballet one. Yeah.
Pas de Dieu.
Yeah.
Is there a particular personality characteristic that you've ever noticed, Warren, among animators?
Well, a lot of them are very much loners because it's one of the things you can do. Well, it depends. I mean, commercial animation is often production line, which is not what interests me, and where anybody could replace anyone else, and 30 different people do the same drawing. But independent animators often are in the dark or by themselves, day and night, producing hundreds and eventually thousands of images. Editing is also that way. Now, Liz, compared to me, is much more of an extrovert. But, I would fall more into that, liking to work somewhat alone. I like collaboration, and I like the stimulation that comes from it. And it's one of the things I really love about theater, because it's collaborative and communal. But there's something about animation where it's you in the image for a long period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I find that's the part. I mean, there's times I need to disappear, and under the camera is where you can do it. Even though I'm very kind of the front and the extrovert, I find animation, it's just, you're in this other world, and you have to be able to sit for very long. When I remember you used to say that all animators tap danced. Remember that you mentioned that? Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
what was
the
it?
National Film Board hired a tap dance instructor, and because when you're sitting and just doing, for 8 hours in a dark room, doing something that's a fraction of an inch and going click, and it again and going click, you eventually needed something, and they decided tap dancing was it. So it would be like a Busby Berkeley musical, when like 20 animators are now tap dancing in the hallway.
Did you do this?
I
don't know if Liz tap dances, but
no, I don't.
The story that I sometimes tell in an animation class. I had a showing of my films there quite a long time ago, when most of the animators were artists on full government salaries working on their own work. It's less that way now. And one of the things that amazed me is everybody had a break around 10 in the morning to celebrate whatever birthday there was. And there are 300 employees in there, so there's almost a birthday a day. And we'd have French vanilla ice cream and brandy. And then at 5 o'clock, they would tap dance. So this is a government agency.
To me, I thought the image was fabulous.
This is a Kafka film, which I definitely want to see done.
I picture it. And I have now a treadmill sitting in the middle of the film studio. So if I get antsy, when I'm like under the camera and doing that, you just jump on and kind of the countryside and stuff. But the tap dancing to me was exciting. It just was an image in my head. And I just thought it was a great, it stayed with me all these years. And I never knew the full story. Now I'm getting the full story. So thank you, Tina. I'm getting the full story on this, Yeah.
Yeah. I'm coming up short on the name, but the Japanese animator who, I saw a film on it recently, and it was about his life and just the work that he had done. But what was so beautiful about the way this was produced was just that it made that sort of going through the same motion, the chop wood, carry water every day, and how his life was so focused and devoted. And there was just an extraordinary beauty about that dedication to that same, you could say it about any profession, but I think because of the specificity of what had to happen and the minute changes it's escaping me, the artist, and to say, but I've always been very fascinated in that sort of, would you say, and I want to ask the same question of you, Liz, in a second, in a different way. So do you feel like the same seeing deeply quality that you have to bring to animation is pretty much true of filmmaking in general? Are they different?
I don't know. I think painting has it, but animation has another quality. You're sitting there, and it's a different world, but there's movement. There's movement in your head. There's rhythm in your head. I always feel it's a choreography. And I'm hearing the rhythm. So it's a different rhythm under the projector when you're, at the click and you're moving. You create this kind of rhythm. So I think it's a little different than painting. It's the same, but you're moving in front of one canvas. Mm-hmm. You are moving across the canvas. You never stay at one spot long enough. You're moving, like you have one color. I mean, I never clean my brushes. I start with one color and I just keep adding. I have one brush and I paint with two tubes, like the paint coming out at the same time, mixing colors and putting them together. So it's a different kind of rhythm, I think. But with animation, it is... you have to be devoted to it. You have to feel. You really have to love that sitting for very long periods of time with it. So, Warren, how do you like?
Yeah, do you see it in your head, Warren, when you're working that way? Where is it happening in your body?
I don't know how to answer where it happens in my body.
Well, sorry, that's a little bit of a strange question, but I guess it's more like, are you alive in that space of time, more in your mind or in your...
Working on animation is like composing music or choreography. Mm-hmm. And you're kind of thinking in those ways. And actually in my training as a director, I had a number of courses in choreography. I was a terrible dancer, but it was difficult for me to study choreography. Whereas directing a documentary, particularly an observational documentary, you try to be invisible. You're moving with real life, and so it's like a different place in the world, and you're trying to document what's there without tainting what's there, and without people ultimately being aware of the presence of the camera. If you're doing a direct cinema or cinema verite kind of documentary, if you're doing a fiction film, it's closer to what theater is like. So each is kind of a different way of relating to the process and the medium.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I find that too. Like when I'm drawing at the beginning, I'm very stressed because I'm really drawing real life, and that's to me very stressful. But once I get going, then there's a rhythm of repeat or images that start, and that's okay. Now I'm, you're, and I think it's just different. Like as Warren says, you react differently to, I think, the worlds. Whether it's the real world or it's a theater or animation, they're almost like different planes or in space.
Sure. Yeah, I'm trying to imagine being in the same place, so it's almost like a lab, in the same place every day, sort of going through, and sort of that place of, for lack of a better word, just balance that you need to be in order to keep the energy flowing for what you're doing and how that finds its way. I want to ask both of you a question as we're winding down. Warren, you were given the Great Teacher Award over at Temple, and I read this in your bio, and I wonder if there's something that you feel specifically that all the great teachers you studied under and yourself perhaps as well possess.
Well, I've tried to absorb a couple of the things from some of the best teachers that I've had. One of them was Sewell Silman at the Yale School of Art, where he didn't explain everything to you. He would, though, present something that had a challenge to it, and you had to figure out how to solve that challenge. And it was only after doing that and seeing everyone's work that a further explanation would be given. Otherwise, you would just follow the explanation and do something a certain way. So that you went through an experience and a search, and whether you solved it or didn't solve it, learning what was behind it was all the more meaningful afterward. And then I had mentioned in terms of directors, Nikos Sacharopoulos, as a way of teaching, as a person who taught directing at Yale, his method, and it would be impossible for me to really kind of explain what it was, but there are aspects about it where he was truly inspiring people. And it would be something that I would aspire to do in my own work.
His energy, his passion was inspiring, or just the way in which he put it all together?
Well, part of it is his personality, which I wouldn't be able to imitate. But he also was, in some ways, producing a challenge, and in critiquing it, was you could accept negative or positive criticism from him, because in each case he was so fully into giving you a sense of what that was and in justifying it. Whereas it's so easy in the arts for someone to give negative criticism and you still don't have a sense of what's behind it, and then your defenses come up and everything else happens.
Yeah. No, sure. Yeah, he was bringing the full
honest, and open about how he reacted and the reasons for it.
Yeah, because it's an emotional reaction as well as a logical or a technical.
You're putting yourself forward in the arts, so it's always a criticism of you as well as it is.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Liz, I'll just sort of lob a similar question out to you before we end, and that is, I know, everyone in the arts really has had challenges and opportunities during this time, and certainly the idea of you teaching painting and illustration and drawing and fashion design online. But I know your students are terribly devoted to the work that you do, and how have you? You know what I'm going to ask.
Yeah, I think I come in with the energy. It's like I almost come through the glass, and I think it's the passion that they pick up, and also, like Warren was saying, what I try to do is teach a process and to have them research, like not give all the answers. I'm saying that this is all problem solving, and they do have to, and it's a hard generation now because I don't think they're used to that. So you almost have to teach process all over again. And I think I do that, but I bring in a lot of art history. I cross the borders. I take them on virtual trips to the Met, and I said, look at this sculpture, and look at the draping and more. I think mine is more, I even come through as just the passion of what they're looking at and what they're supposed to be finding. And if they don't, I am very straight up about it, that, you have to go back and you have to try it one more time. But it is a hard thing because it's a sensitive issue. You're balancing personality, especially I think now on the virtual, you're not looking at them. You're not in their same space. And that's a little bit more difficult, but you do have to, I think it's the challenge of the research. Like what Warren was saying is that half of it is going on that journey, what they learned along the way, and how they produced it at the end. They may be a horrible, horrible artist, but they produced a brilliant idea. You have to balance that out and say, well, the idea kind of overrides whether they can draw or they can't draw. They're trying as hard as they can. And you kind of I come in from that aspect of whether they understood what they were on the journey for. And I think that, that's all part of, I guess, like Warren. I remember being in Warren's class, and it was an amazing journey. It was like a very, very few, I think, professors or people just in general have that ability to stimulate. And I tried to do too. I took even inspiration from that of how do you stimulate somebody, whether they're a student or they're another person, or when I have to kind of knock down doors, like a lot of times to, get shows ready for us or whatever, to absolutely convince this person that they need to show our work. So that's kind of my end of it. And that's a forte that I just keep putting the foot in the door so they can't close it.
The virtual door.
The virtual door, yeah. But
yeah.
So I think it's all that, I mean, you have that quality too, Tina. It's
I don't know. There's no physics in my background. There's no. There's a lot of Beckett and a lot of love for the world, that world. But Warren Bass, Liz Goldberg, thank you so very much for taking valuable time to give us a window into the world of Cuban Queens, your animation, the work you're doing. It's just been a wonderful conversation, and I've learned so much. And thank you both for the work. Best of luck with this, getting this out there. And I can't wait to see what other pieces of inspiration you turn up for us.
Yeah, thank you so much. And Tina, it's been a pleasure, really.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm so glad, Warren, to learn about all your love of Beckett and directing and all your experience in directing, but your love of, it's not that often that you really run across people who really love the absurdists.
Yes.
They're they're dedefinitely out there, but there's not.
Yeah, it's a special.
It's a small village.
Yes.
in America, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so very, very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks to you all very much for joining us this evening. And I hope you'll plan to be with us next Saturday, March the 6th, when Emily Bruton Schilling is with us. Emily is an artist, a writer, and the daughter of Philadelphia avant-garde artist and pataphysician James E. Bruton. And we're going to talk to Emily about her journey to put together a puzzle, really, of her father's works. After his untimely death at age 37, she is on a journey, on a mission to put those pieces together. And it's a lovely story and a very interesting story, and one that I hope you'll share with us next Saturday at 5 p.m. And until then, I just, from everybody here at the IRC, wishing you a very safe and a very healthy week ahead. Be well.